Hi, this is Herman Kid Montes, former world-rated boxer. I was a welterweight back in the day when boxing was real. And you're listening to the Ringside Boxing Show.
Live from Monterey on California's beautiful Central Coast, this is the Ringside Boxing Show. I'm Dennis Taylor, welcoming you to join me and my expert analysts, Travis Hartman, Rizwan Zahid, and John J. Responti today and every week for the hottest, sweatiest show on the West Coast. And now, from Studio 1A, it's the Ringside Boxing Show.
Welcome to the Ringside Boxing Show on the Grueling Truth Sports Network. I'm Dennis Taylor, and we got some outstanding stuff coming at you again this week. In a few minutes, John J. Responti and I will be talking in depth with one of the best referees in the sport, Benjy Esteves, who over the past 27 years has been the third man in the ring for fights like Pernell Whitaker versus Felix Trinidad, Arturo Gatti versus Ivan Robinson, the rematch. I think that was a fight of the year. Prince Naseem Hamed versus Kevin Kelly, Hopkins-Tarver, Cotto Mosley, and last year's rematch between Canelo and Golovkin. Benjy grew up in Hell's Kitchen, pretty rough area in New York City back then, and he studied at the knee of referees like Joe Cortez, Tony Orlando, Tony Perez, Rudy Battle, Frank Capuchino, and he's been inducted into the New Jersey Boxing Hall of Fame. Before that, we'll hear from Paul McLaughlin, our British correspondent, who's going to catch us up on the most recent happenings in the UK. And we'll lead off, as always, with our expert analyst. Travis Hartman is a professional boxer, trainer, and promoter in Osborne, Missouri. He's now living and training in Orlando. Rizwan Zahid, a boxing journalist from Toronto. And John J. Responti is chief lead writer for MaxBoxing.com and DogHouseBoxing.com. And John and I are co-authors of Intimate Warfare, the true story of the Arturo Gatti and Mickey Ward boxing trilogy, an Amazon bestseller. We want to give a shout-out to start off with to our local star, Ruben Villa IV, RV4, who just announced that he'll put his 16-0 record on the line September 20th in Midland, Texas, against a fighter named Enrique Vivas, who is 17-0, 9 KOs. Vivas is from Texcoco, Mexico. He's now living in Montebello, California. So he's another step up for Ruben, who's a 15-time national amateur champion from Salinas, California. He's currently the WBO international featherweight champ, and he's ranked number 8 in the world by that sanctioning body. The fight's going to be co-feature of a Showbox, the New Generation card, with the main event featuring Michael Dutchover and once beaten Thomas Matisse. Should be a great night of boxing on September 20th, so congrats to Garcia Boxing and Ruben Villa. Ruben and his team are going to be headed down to Riverside to finish their training up at Robert Garcia's gym. And actually, Robert and Mikey Garcia were up here in our area for Concours d'Elegance yesterday. Travis had a fight last night in Louisiana against Mason Menard, a hometown guy with 35-4 record and 25 knockouts. Travis had 9 days notice on this and basically trained in his own basement on a heavy bag. No mitts, no sparring, nothing. And he went the distance with Menard, lost a unanimous decision. So woulda, coulda, shoulda, but with a full training camp, who knows what Travis might have been able to do. And guys in the by the way category. By the way, Travis is probably not going to join us today. He's got a busted eardrum. But you probably have to have been a real hardcore boxing fan to recognize the name Carino Garcia. He also went by Kenny Garcia. But people ought to know his story. So I'm just gonna throw it out there today. No need for anybody to comment on it unless you want to. But this is a guy who was a super welterweight from Chihuahua, Mexico. Fought from 1990 to 2009, almost 20 years. After his first 18 fights, he was 0-18, and he had been knocked out 6 times. And in September of '94, he TKO'd a guy named Norberto Bueno, who was 18-11. So that was a big upset, and it was the beginning of a streak where Carino Garcia went 32-2 with 1 draw after an 0-18 start, including wins over Meldrick Taylor, Simon Brown, Terrence Ali, Frankie Randall, Rene Herrera, Jorge Vaca, who he beat twice. He was the WBC international champ for a long time and the IBF intercontinental champ for a brief time. but never got a shot at a world title. Carino Garcia finished 40-28-4 with 29 knockouts after an 0-18 start. And by the way, he made his debut in 1990 against Bobby Gunn, who wound up winning a fringe title in the cruiserweight division, and now he's the undisputed bare knuckle champion. So I just wanted to mention that guy. I thought people ought to know about him. John, have you heard of this guy? You're an
I have heard.
Yeah.
And as I said off air, it reminded me a little bit of Freddie Pendleton, but Carino did even better, starting 0-18. I mean, I'm sitting here while you're reading all this and thinking about Dennis. I'm thinking, hell, we got to get this guy. We got to talk to this guy. I mean, I would love to know how you continue in a career when you're 0-18 and you've been knocked out 6 times.
I agree.
You know, I gotta find out what your mindset is. Is it because you got to eat? Is it because you got nothing else to do? Is it because you whatever the reason? There's got to be. And then how did he manage to turn it all around?
Exactly.
So I gotta start doing some research and try to see if I can find this guy. Hopefully he's out there somewhere on social media or somewhere. Anybody listening to this show, gosh, email us or something if they know where Carino is. But I'm really fascinated by this man's story. I've been fascinated by boxers, Dennis. I'm sure you probably too. You probably too, Riz, I would imagine, who fight when they have losing records, and why? Well, how do they keep rebounding after losing? I've always been fascinated by that. How you keep lifting yourself up, and you see it all the time. You know, you see, like yesterday, I was watching the fights, and this guy, his name escapes me right now, was fighting first fight last night in LA. Was fighting a guy from Russia, a big amateur star and everything, and he knocks the Russian down in the first round, and he's shocked. The Russian is shocked. The crowd is shocked, and I'm shocked because, you know, he's 4-6 with 3 knockouts. He's supposed to get knocked out, right? And to his credit, he went for it and didn't win. Of course, he ended up getting not disqualified, but he spit his mouthpiece out a number of times. He lost 2 points. It's like, oh, vey, what is this? But I'm thinking, my point is, what would happen if a guy like that had a proper training and maybe was able to be more serious about his career? So back to Carino, somehow he must have been able to turn it around due to commitment or whatever. And we know that's what happened with Freddie Pendleton. I mentioned him before, that Freddie was finally able to quit his job, concentrate on boxing more. So, yeah, Dennis, you got me fired up here. I got to try to find Carino Garcia. We got to talk to this guy.
Yeah, hopefully he speaks English. You know, I'm gonna get on YouTube and see if there's any interviews out there after a fight or whatever, and see what we can find out about him. But yeah, you know, I found this guy when I was thinking about Travis, because Travis right now is 16, 27-1, and still loves every minute of his days in the ring. And at age 36, he just went the full distance with Mason Menard, who came into the fight, I think something like 35-4.
35-4.
Yeah. Unbelievable. Riz, Canelo and the Canelo-Golovkin deal is in place. If Kovalev, the Canelo and Kovalev deal is in place if Kovalev beats Anthony Yarde on August 24th. That's what we're reading this week. If Yarde wins that fight, he too expects to fight Canelo next. So that fight, by the way, is coming up this Saturday night, the Kovalev and Yarde fight. Who do you think Canelo is likely to be facing? Do you think Canelo would really fight Yarde? He's got other better options than that. Kovalev's high profile, but if Kovalev loses and it's Yarde, you think he'll fight him?
I think Yarde, if he wins, should have a bigger profile in the UK, and that makes it a lot easier to make a UK fight. Okay. I think the funny thing is, Yarde is definitely a true light heavyweight. He's a big dude, but he hasn't really fought anyone yet. Obviously, he's fighting Kovalev on Saturday, so I think I think for Canelo, Yarde is definitely the easier fight. That being said, after Saturday, that notion might be completely out the window. If Kovalev, because I mean, there's a reason anytime we see these kind of fights, the bigger name calling out someone that some people perceive to be a challenge, they're doing it for a reason, right? There's got to be something Canelo and his team sees in Kovalev that says we can easily beat this guy. And not if, we might be able to beat him, because they're going up in weight and they see, the risk and the risk and reward that comes with a fight like that. They're going up or they're attempting to make a catch weight, whatever it is, because clearly they think there's it's an easy enough win for Canelo. And reading some other comments, they're saying how Canelo is 168, still had to cut weight. They're saying probably at 175, he probably walks around above 175. So as far as him being overmatched by size, that may not necessarily be the case. I think the height difference is definitely key. And it'll be an adjustment, and his boxing has to be there. But I think they think that Kovalev is just too slow, and with Andre Ward's body shots and angles beating Kovalev, they can emulate a very similar game plan. The rematch with that he had with Eddie Alvarez, Kovalev, that is, we saw kind of the Kovalev that we saw from about 5 years ago, right? Well before the higher profile fight sport, before the higher profile fame, and where he was just constantly disciplined, looked leaner. Now against Yarde, fighting in Russia, I wouldn't call it a trap fight, but fighting at home brings a lot of other challenges, with the tension and media requirements and all these other things. So I wonder how he's going to handle that. But again, why is Canelo looking for a Kovalev fight? That just seems, initial reaction is, well, that's a really risky proposition. But again, if they're doing it, then there's got to be something they see, right? It's like when Pacquiao fought De La Hoya, a lot of people thought, De La Hoya is going to be, De La Hoya is going to be too big for him. De La Hoya was zapped at that weight, and any one of us could have beat him that night. I think what we haven't heard yet is what the weight would be, because I'm thinking that there's got to be a potential weight stipulation, or there's not just this is not just going to be a simple light heavyweight fight. The weight restriction is 175, and guys can weigh in whatever they want on fight night. I'd be shocked if that was it, knowing Canelo's history, where there's a weight stipulation pretty much on absolutely every fight that he's ever had.
Great point.
I can't see that happening. And the other thing that doesn't make sense to me is why all of a sudden now he wants to jump up. Before, 155 to 160 was too much of a jump up, and they had to be, they had to do that carefully and all that. All of a sudden now, you have no problem jumping up 15 pounds. I find that a little awkward. So again, the other side of this could be there might be some more pressure from DAZN to put on better fights. And if they're looking at, the funny thing is, if you're looking at who does Canelo have a better chance against, or what is a riskier fight for him? Is it Billy Joe Saunders or is it Kovalev? And I think in many ways it's Billy Joe Saunders because of his style, and where Kovalev, at his age is older and slower, and Canelo does have the boxing ability to might have the ability to outbox someone like Kovalev, which is very possible. Against Billy Joe Saunders, is probably not the case. So him going up in weight might actually help him because, styles make fights, like we all know, and if he's very strategic with how he approaches it, it might work out in his favor. But I got to think that I think they would be preferring to face Kovalev because they've had that in mind for a while. I think if Yarde wins, especially if he wins by knockout, I can't see Canelo moving up to fight Yarde because Yarde is a power puncher, and Kovalev does have some boxing skills. So if Yarde is able to knock out Kovalev on the road in Russia, I think he has the ability to handle the pressure and all that kind of stuff to fight a guy like Canelo. But again, there's got to be a reason they're looking at fighting Kovalev. They're not saying they want the winner of this fight. They've been talking about Kovalev for a couple months now. They gave them a lowball offer, and again, I understand they probably have a very limited amount of opponents that can be approved. But to me, it says something that they'd rather go up 2 weights to fight Kovalev rather than fight Golovkin right now or 6 months ago. That says a lot to me because Golovkin has been very patient, I think, considering it took about 5 years essentially to make 1 or 2 fights. the drug testing and this and that, and they were waiting for Golovkin to get old. Like, there's no way about it. We can't, there's no other reason they waited for that fight to happen. And then the rematch worked out in his favor, and they're doing the same thing for the third fight. So, and for Golovkin, I mean, he's, 5 times unbeaten, and he's approaching 38 now, right? Something like that, yeah. 37, 38. He is not a spring chicken at all. So it says something to me that they think Kovalev is in some ways the easier opponent than Golovkin. And on another note, it didn't happen in the exact same situation because Andre Ward was in that division in between the two fighters. But rather, I mean, he wasn't going to go down to fight Golovkin. But even at a catchweight, whatever else, he still elected to go up to eventually fight Kovalev. Now, I know it's a slightly different situation, but again, there's a reason. I think there's a reason why Canelo is going up rather than immediately fighting Golovkin a third time. That says a lot to me.
Do you guys think that might be an indicator that Canelo just might not be willing to work as hard in the gym as he used to make? Could it, surely at this age, well, Canelo's still a young guy, but I mean, making 160 is going to be a lot tougher than making 175 or a catchweight 170, whatever it's going to be that they're going to bring Golovkin down to. John, do you think that might be it might be dropping a hint that Canelo's getting tired of the sport after all these years in it?
No, I don't think so. Personally, I didn't get to say anything about this on the last show, but I'm actually tired of Canelo's act in a way. I wrote an article that got a lot of response that I said, memo to Canelo, stop being a diva. Mm-hmm. I just think that some of what he's doing with Golden Boy, what he's doing with, he's trying to pick and choose, and it's like, come on, man. You had more catchweight fights than anybody I can remember. They set things up so nice for you. He paid his dues. But I just think that since he's I guess in essence, the number one guy boxing, he's milking it. And that bugs me. I don't like it. I think it's gone to his head more than it was a few years ago. And he just doesn't like Golovkin. And I just don't think – I think it's two things with Golovkin. I do, Dennis. I think he doesn't like him. He was angry at what he said. He can't get over that. And he's saying to himself, no way I'm going to fight him again and he's going to get all that money. And you're not going to tell me that I'm going to fight him again, which is ridiculous again. So it tells you who really runs boxing, which I don't like. And I agree with Riz. I think he sees Kovalev, who obviously is not a spring chicken either, 36 years old, and we know he's on the back nine of his career, as somebody that is an easier fight. I read somewhere that Canelo and Kovalev sparred, and now this doesn't always mean anything, but according to what I read, Canelo had a field day with Kovalev. He went to the body, and we know Kovalev didn't like it there, and he's a shorter man by a lot, but the thinking is he can do to Kovalev what he did to Rocky Fielding, which is not really a good comparison in a sense, because as we know, Kovalev can really crack. But it's Alvarez, it's Canelo who really wants that fight with Kovalev. So that's the way I understand the whole thing. I think his desire is still there. I just think that his head has gotten too large when it comes to things. And he wants to call his own shots. That's fine, but he doesn't have to be a jerk about it. That's the thing I don't like. A lot of these people have been with him in the beginning of his career. Oscar De La Hoya's Golden Boy, who I almost never defend, has done a pretty good job of promoting his career, I think. Ryan Garcia is mad at Golden Boy now, mostly because Canelo is mad at Golden Boy. So I just think that I just don't like that disloyalty in the sport, and it just bothers me. But no, I think, answering your question again, Dennis, I think his desire is still there. And boxers love titles, and even though you can get one in a trinket so easy nowadays, I think he thinks it'd be pretty nice to say, look, I'm junior middleweight, and light heavyweight champion. That's another one that he can add to his collection. So it's a combination of things. But I think most of it is his desire to not fight Golovkin. And again, that's another, as far as I'm concerned, just a ridiculous thing, because Golovkin is the guy he's the flip side of Canelo in a sense, because, here's a guy who comes to America when he's 30 years old. He didn't get any breaks in Europe. He had to earn everything he got. He gets here. People don't want to fight him. he wants to fight Canelo 4 or 5 years ago. They stall, like Riz says. They let him get older. I mean, that's just wrong. I just don't like that. My sense of fair play just doesn't like it. I understand it, but I don't have to like it. So Golovkin is the guy that has really gotten screwed and not enjoyed it at all. I mean, this has been a bad experience in a lot of ways for him. The fact that he's going to fight for one of the titles that Canelo got stripped of, as far as I'm concerned, is justice. So Canelo's going to go after Kovalev. And one more thing, that fight Saturday, you guys are right. That fight, that is a trap fight. That's right, what Riz said. You talk about a live underdog. I don't know what's going to happen in that fight. I have an article coming out. I think Kovalev's the favorite just because of where the fight is happening. Really, obviously, the venue's in Russia. He's so much more experienced. But we don't know. You got to remember that Kovalev had a problem. A month ago, I read about something that happened in an airplane with some woman again, and it's like, God, Sergey, what are you doing? Are we like self-destructive here? We don't know what happened with that other incident. So is his head all there? There's that, the pressure of fighting in Russia. But, Dennis, as we know, he's got Buddy McGirt in his corner, and the man is one of the best trainers. So if he's going to be ready, he'll be as ready as he can be. But that fight, when it was first set, Kovalev was a solid favorite. He still is, but not solid. That one, I'm really intrigued by that fight.
Okay, so Golovkin, meanwhile, is going to fight Sergey Derevyanchenko. They've agreed to terms financially, I guess, for an October 5 fight at Madison Square Garden. And, John, like you said, the prize is going to be the middleweight title belt that the IBF just took away from Canelo. Golovkin's an inch and a half taller. He's got a 3-inch reach advantage on Derevyanchenko, but he's 37 years old. He's 39-1-1, and there are people out there who think he should be 41-0. Derevyanchenko has had 14 pro fights, 13-1, 10 knockouts. His loss was a split decision to Daniel Jacobs last October. Riz, who do you like in this one? Does Derevyanchenko have a legitimate shot to beat Golovkin?
Absolutely. Golovkin, again, I've been saying it since for a while, since the Kell Brook fight. I've noticed a decline, and it hasn't been 20% drop in each fight, but it's been noticeable to me. And I think Derevyanchenko easily could have beaten Jacobs, easily could have gotten the nod on the scorecards. For a lot of people, he did, and then therefore could have easily been fighting Canelo in this past May. And again, you saw how close Jacobs did against Canelo, and Jacobs, we saw, we all agreed that there was no urgency from him there, right? We thought he could have stepped up his urgency in that fight. I don't think Derevyanchenko has any problems with urgency, because just like Golovkin, ironically enough, neither of them have been giving anything. Neither of them have had, they've been overlooked numerous times. They haven't, had to, they haven't had the fights that they wanted. They haven't had the attention that they wanted. But, Derevyanchenko's not young either, though. He's also 33. And he's fought fairly well most of his career. That was the only loss he had, the Daniel Jacobs fight. But he also has a rich amateur background. I'd be surprised. Let's put it this way: I'd be surprised if Golovkin knocks him out, because Golovkin to me or maybe he knocks him out late, because I think Golovkin needs to change a few things up. I don't think we were able to see it obviously his last fight against Steve Rolls. And Rolls, to be honest, to me, I don't think he did that bad in the first couple rounds. I thought he arguably, maybe won a round or two. But obviously he was in there with a different animal, and he's never had that kind of step up before. But it's hard to see what adjustments Golovkin has made, since the second Canelo loss. So even though he has a new trainer and all that, we didn't really see that in his first fight against Steve Rolls. I think we'll see that more on display over here. I mean, we know at this point, guys, they're not really changing too much in terms of their approach and their style and all that kind of stuff, right? But I think Jonathan Banks will provide some more fine tuning. I think he wants him a little more on his toes, and I think very similar to almost the way Vladimir Klitschko kind of changed and really worked. You have such a great jab, and this applies to both Golovkin and Klitschko. You have such a great jab. You have such great fundamentals, and you have the ability to, smother guys and win rounds without even getting hit. You have the ability to dominate with your boxing skills, and your power is always going to be there. So I think even though Golovkin wasn't, I wouldn't say he was ever reckless or he wasn't, but I don't think he needs to be on full attack all the time. People were like, oh, Canelo was backing up Golovkin in the second fight. Maybe Golovkin saw that as more openings for him to land, because most of us saw that he should have won that fight too, and he probably was swept the last 3 or 4 rounds. So I think that's a better approach for him at this stage, because coming forward means you're slower. And at his age, 37, it's a little more predictable. So it'd be interesting to see how he fights against Derevyanchenko. I'd be curious to see if he elects to box more, which I think he should, because again, we know he has amateur pedigree to do so, and I just think he'll be a little more systemic. And I think if he does that, he can have, I wouldn't say a career resurgence, because it's not like he went anywhere, but I think he can do better than he has in his current state, because I can't see his style 2 or 3 years ago lasting him much longer at his age right now. But again, Vladimir Klitschko was undefeated for 10 years for working off the jab, spacing, and being in position to punch, but also making sure he's never getting hit. People kind of broke it apart, but I mean, there's a reason he went undefeated for 10 years, and Golovkin doesn't have that size advantage over a lot of middleweights, but I think he has a brilliance that I think a lot of fighters just simply don't have. But I don't think we've seen it all yet. But you got to think there's a reason he went to Jonathan Banks, and you got to think there's, with his history with the Klitschkos, you got to think there's some input from the Klitschkos based on the trainer he hired too.
Mm-hmm. Who do you guys think wants a piece of Billy Joe Saunders? Sanders, I thought, made a huge move last week. He severed ties with Frank Warren and signed up with Eddie Hearn in Matchroom, and that basically makes him a DAZN guy, which puts him in position to face Canelo and Golovkin and Callum Smith, and he's calling all those guys out. Question is, which of those guys is most likely to fight Saunders? Who wants him? John, who wants Saunders?
I don't think anybody really wants him.
Yeah, this is a ducked guy.
He is, and he's such a jerk in so many ways. I don't even think he's embarrassing to a lot of people in the UK, but he is a style nightmare for just about everybody. Callum Smith is taller, younger, as far as that goes, but Canelo and Golovkin will definitely have problems. I think Golovkin would probably have the most, because he's slower, as we saw, we've said and seen, and he's gotten slower. That's what I've noticed when Riz was talking about Golovkin. That's what I've seen, is never was very fast anyway, but his reflexes are a little slower, and he always starts slow, but now he really starts slow, and it takes him a while to get that motor going. But Saunders, because he's so clever in there, and you remember what he did to David Lemieux, which was he just put on a clinic, and that was just an exhibition of great boxing ability. He gets himself in that kind of shape, and he's a nightmare for any of the top guys that gets in there with him. And I think he made a smart move. I do. We have mixed feelings about Eddie Hearn, especially when it comes to the whole thing with Dillian White. But as far as getting guys fights and promoting their careers, he does a good job with fighters. I mean, I don't blame him for doing that. Frank Warren's been around forever, and in a sense, he's a legendary UK guy. But Eddie is the cutting edge. He's the young guy. He's the ambitious guy. So I don't really blame him as far as that goes for his career, because his career's been pretty much in neutral here for a while. So he pretty much had to do that to get his career going forward. But fighting those guys, that's why I think that you haven't seen him in there with Canelo. You haven't seen him in there with Golovkin. It's because the teams know everything that we know, that, look, whoever fights him is going to have a hard time. And because of all those intangibles, the guy is really a good athlete, Dennis, and he's not the hardest puncher, but it doesn't matter, because his footwork, his speed, his cleverness, his boxing brain is really, really there. And if I was like Jonathan Banks, I would not want my guy to fight him. It might happen. He might have to fight him, because he's Golovkin, as we just said. Golovkin is part of the zone. I would, if I was Eddie Hearn, I would love the Canelo-Saunders match. I think that would be a really cool fight. But Golovkin might end up fighting him, and he might have success. I mean, this is the thing about boxing. You know, you think you know a lot, and then something happens, and you think, well, I might know quite a bit, but I don't know enough that I can always predict everything exactly right. But again, he is a tough out for anyone. He fights Danny Jacobs. He fights any of the top guys. He's an odds-on favorite to maybe not win all the time, but his chances are very high, 50-50, 51-49. He's just got that unique boxer style that if he wins rounds, he's going to beat you. And as I said, what he did to David Lemieux, who's obviously pretty basic, a big bomber who's pretty basic, but that shows you what he can do to guys slower than him. He just box circles around him. And he could do a lot of that with the top guys as well.
And Riz, I'll let you weigh in on that, but I also want to catch people up on what's been going on with the World Boxing Super Series 140-pound finale between Regis Prograis, the Rougarou, and Scotland's Josh Taylor. Prograis and his promoter, Lou DiBella, dropped a bomb on the WBS a little over a week ago, announcing that Prograis was pulling out of the tournament because the WBSS hadn't yet put funding for that fight into escrow, which was a breach of the contract. This wasn't the first time that the World Boxing Super Series has apparently been dealing with a cash flow problem, which has freaked out its fighters. So Team Prograis filed a lawsuit, and the World Boxing Super Series promised a countersuit. And the good news is that I guess the two sides are talking again and might be back on track for a fight on October 26th at the O2 in London. And that's great for fans because Prograis and Taylor are both undefeated and they're both legit. And it should be a hell of a fight. But, man, the World Boxing Super Series sure seems to be flying by the seat of its pants and kind of scrambling to stay afloat, and it makes you wonder if it has a future. And I'm not sure I've even got a question there, but it's just such a strange situation with that World Boxing Super Series. So latch on to either one of those subjects, Sanders or the Rougarou and Josh Taylor, if you want.
I think Sanders, Sanders is a weirdo. We all kind of know that. But he's definitely taking control of his own career, and that's something I admire him for. Rather than hiding behind promoters and saying, promoters are doing this and that, he said, look, I'm not getting the fights I want. I understand the situation. All the guys I want to fight are on the other side. So I have to go join that other side to make these fights happen. Otherwise, I'm not going to, if I'm that confident in my ability, I'm going to go make it happen because otherwise I'm not going to get the fights that I want to happen. So I do admire him for doing that because there's a lot of fighters who are simply not willing to do that. So I hope we get the kind of fights he wants. He definitely says, I don't want Golovkin, I don't want Canelo. And I understand why he's saying that because, frankly, most of us thinks he has a pretty good chance of beating all of those guys. When he's on his game, I don't think anyone can land a shot on him. That's when he's on his game. When he's slacking and kind of in between, completely different scenario. Saunders has more ability than most fighters, so I really want to see him in the big fight because the one time we did see him in that big fight, it was against Lemieux, and I was there, 10 feet away from him, and I'm just watching him absolutely school a guy on the road. So I do want to see him in the big fights because we know he has the ability to really expose a lot of these guys. As far as Prograis and Taylor, I have no idea what the hell's going on with the World Boxing Super Series. The fact that Prograis had to pull out and was fine with waiting for a lawsuit just because of all the nonsense that's going on, that says something. It seems like the Super 6 Series is not the same one that happened, with any of the previous ones. Not the one with all the cruiserweights and not the one that we saw, the original one with all the super middleweights. So why something's happening here? There's something different. I don't know what that difference is, but something is clearly different because Usyk got paid, Gassiev got paid, all those other guys got paid. We didn't really hear any murmurs about anything else. I mean, for the most part, there was maybe an injury or two, but the whole series is pretty much wrapped up in a year and a half, right? Which we kind of expected. So what's different here? I don't know what the difference is here, but there is something that's making it different. And whatever that is, I mean, if that seems like there's a common denominator of some sort that's messing up the natural order of things. So whatever it is, I think that's what's causing the issue. So I hope they rectify that, because I think whoever the investors are, and that's probably what has to be looked at a little more before they decide to make another Super 6 again. Because the order itself has been great, the fights have been great, but the logistics clearly have not been what we expected. So I hope they set that, and fix that, because the Super 6, when it's done correctly, is absolutely perfect. It is what boxing should be about, and we do want to see more of that, but I don't think we're going to see more of that if we're going to have more and more issues like this.
There's also been some pretty serious outside the ring wrangling in the heavyweight division. Eddie Hearn announced that the Joshua Ruiz rematch is going to take place in Saudi Arabia. Ruiz immediately said, "Not so fast. I haven't signed anything, and I'm not fighting anywhere but the U.S." So some think this is a money ploy by Ruiz. Hearn's rumored to be offering him $9 million for the fight, and Joshua is supposedly going to get somewhere between $40 and $60 million. So that's quite a discrepancy, considering Ruiz holds all three of Joshua's heavyweight titles right now. Why doesn't Ruiz, the defending champion, deserve a much bigger payday than what Hearn is offering? First of all, John.
Well, he signed that contract, and it's like anything. It's like when you buy a house or buy a car or whatever. If you know that in a sense that you're on one hand taking a shot at winning heavyweight honors or the nicest car you want, using that as an equivalency, but in the fine print, if you actually do get to drive away with that car, if they call you back, they'll go, wait, you've got this and this and this and this. And that's kind of what's going on here as far as I'm concerned. Ruiz knew what he was doing when he signed the contract to fight Joshua. He knew this was a shot. He got the shot because Gerald Miller, remember, messed up with his stupidity with the steroids. So it was a fluke shot in a way. It was very Rocky-esque, as we were all saying. He got the shot, but he's limited now because of that initial contract. Now, I don't blame him for doing what he's doing, because he won the fight. And I'm sure that he's got people telling him, look, you're not getting much respect here, man. I mean, Eddie Hearn is not treating you. He's just taking care of his guy. We know who his guy is. It's Joshua. So he's going to make sure his guy gets an incredible amount of money. I didn't hear that much, Dennis. I heard $30 million, which is still an incredible amount of money. But I did hear $9 million for Ruiz. And you know that now Ruiz is thinking, wait, I'm the guy with the belt. Mm-hmm. And I'm only going to get $9 million. Why don't you up the ante and give me like 15 and lower Joshua to 25? I'm sure he accepts that, in a sense, that Joshua is still the A side. We've got all that crap at boxing about A sides and B sides. It's another thing I don't like, but it's strange though in boxing that the old adage that the winner, all the laurels in a sense go to the winner, is not true. Especially when you sign a contract. So he signed the contract because he knew this was a chance in a lifetime. He knew if he won, he'd have to fight him again. But I'm sure he wasn't thinking about that. He was just thinking about the fight in front of him, and this was my shot. And all of this has happened with all the talk of the rematch, and he has really had no control over anything, and it bugs him. And I get that. I understand. I think it would bug anybody. I've read stuff from other people that, he signed a contract, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, well, sure, he signed a contract, but he's a human being, and he won the heavyweight title, and he's feeling like a Rodney Dangerfield of boxing in a sense. He's feeling like, look, I'm not getting any respect. Show me a little more respect here. Try to make it a little more fair, but there it is. This is boxing, so it's not really going to be fair. I'm pulling for Ruiz. I hope he gets more money. I think it really is a money thing. I think he knows that Al Haymon is his mentor in a sense and his advisor. I think Al is telling him, look, you signed a contract, my man, and you, unless you want to go get stuck in court for the next 2 or 3 years, you got to fight him again. So at some point, I'm hoping Ruiz is going to say, fine, if he gets like $5 more million or something, then get to camp, because this is going to be a totally different animal with Joshua in the second fight. I'm convinced of that. Ruiz needs a full camp. Go ahead.
I was going to say, do you guys think that there are more Joshua fans in England than Latino fans in America and Mexico that are going to be rooting for Ruiz? Who's got the bigger fan base? Riz, what do you think?
That's a difficult answer, because I think a lot of people still don't know really about Ruiz. They know him as the big guy who knocked out the person that we thought was a heavyweight champ. And I think, you know what, as many people who do like Joshua, I think there's a lot of people who don't like him. But they're all still going to watch him fight. Where people are not necessarily going to watch Ruiz fight. I think that's the difference. So I think, I think Ruiz he knows the fight's going to happen. I think he's trying to leverage as much as he can out of it, because I think he understands that if he loses this fight, this is his Buster Douglas moment, and people will never, how many people are going to want to fight him, right? Maybe this is it for him. So he understands that he can leverage as much as he can, and Joshua can't sidestep him. Joshua always has this mark on his record. Joshua can go on and beat every fighter there is. He can go and knock out Deontay Wilder. People are always going to remember that Ruiz beat him. And Joshua, he knows how much Joshua wants to right that wrong. And because of that, he has leverage, and he's going to use as much of it as he can. So there is a contract in place, but, he's like, fine, you can take me to court for 2 or 3 years. I still don't have to get in the ring. I think that's what he understands, and that's what, dude, it doesn't look like he needs to be – does Ruiz look like a guy who needs to be in the gym every day? Well, he looks like he needs to be in the gym every day, but it doesn't look like he's going to be in the gym every day, right? It's not like he's going to really miss the training and all that. That's not who he is. So, he can be like, sure, you can take me to court. You're not going to end up having the rematch and right that wrong. So I think that's what he's banking on, and I think it's going to work. It's just a matter of how much. And eventually the fight will happen. It's just because, again, it's bigger when the big name needs someone. When that happens, they're going to be willing to bend over a little more, because and Joshua, funny enough, wanted to fight in New York because he wanted to do it all over again. He wanted to do it right. And again, Eddie Hearn is the boss, and, he's doing what a promoter should be doing, which is getting the most amount of money for his fighter. And that's what he's getting. And Ruiz, I don't think Ruiz cares about fighting. I don't think Ruiz really cares where he fights. I just think he wants a bigger piece of the pie. And not just at the dessert table, in real life too. That's also a metaphor. So I think that's all he's trying to do at this point. And I don't blame him, because I don't think he's, Ruiz is kind of a simple fella, right? I mean, with the money he made, he can buy as many Mars bars as he wants for life. He's pretty set the way he wants to do it. But again, he's just leveraging himself because he knows Joshua needs him more than Ruiz needs Joshua, which is a sentence that none of us thought we'd ever say.
And you know what? If he beats Joshua again, he'll never have to buy another Mars bar or Snickers bar. He's going to have television commercials for those guys, and Taco Bell and Chipotle and everybody else, because he is going to be a big, big star, and that even bigger star than he is in the Latino community now. If he wins again. Speaking of which, John, last week Joshua said that Ruiz got in a lucky punch, and that's what happened in the fight. Lucky punch. Do you believe that?
No. Joshua, I don't know what's going on with him. He's in a war of words with Lennox Lewis. I don't know what's going on. It's again. I think this is what happens to a lot of people that are famous, and it's detrimental. You've got people whispering in your ear. You've got hangers-on saying, it was just a lucky punch, and you repeat it, because that's easier to say. What he initially said was, he beat me. He don't want to say that anymore. So, no, it wasn't a lucky punch. Ruiz was looking to counter. He's a counter-puncher. He was looking for that all night, and he finally got him. And after he got knocked down, Joshua went for it, and he countered him and clipped him on the temple, and that was all. There was nothing fluke about it as far as that part goes. So I don't know. That's again, Riz made a good comment when he said Joshua has a lot of people that don't like him. That's true. I don't think he helps himself with that. He doesn't help himself stating those kind of comments, because that makes you wonder, like, hey, did you not learn anything from what happened? Who knows, though? I do believe that he did learn something, Joshua, and as I said, I think he will be a different different fighter, because he knows that this is really it for him in a sense that I believe he has to win this fight. This is basically a do-or-die fight for him. He has to be in the best shape, and he has to have a different plan. He has to fight Ruiz differently. He can't go in there like he did that time, and he's just going to get countered again and get stopped again. And there's always going to be questions about his chin. So there's a lot going on. So maybe it's just all the pressure too and he's tired of Lennox Lewis saying things. And Lennox Lewis didn't say anything that was so out of bounds. I didn't think. He just doesn't want anybody to criticize him in a sense. And if anybody can criticize him, it's Lennox Lewis. So I don't know what's going on with Joshua, but he's got a lot riding, and he knows it. And Ruiz is milking it, and Ruiz is forcing things, and so it's a frustrating situation for him right now. I can't wait for the fight. I think it's going to be a really intriguing one in December.
Riz, how do you like Virgil Ortiz? He says he's a welterweight now, and he's moving into that very, very rich 147-pound division that's getting richer. This is a 21-year-old guy with a lot of buzz, 14-0, all knockouts, including a knockout earlier this month against Antonio Orozco, who was 28-1. He might still be a year away, but is this a guy that Spence and Crawford and the rest of that deep 147-pound division should worry about? Are you impressed with him?
I don't think we need to discuss that yet because, like you said, he's only 21. So a lot of those guys might be out of the division by the time he arrives, which works out well, doesn't it? So I think it's a very strategic move because for the next 2 or 3 years, he could be fighting other guys. And by that point, Errol Spence might have moved up to 154. Crawford maybe does the same. Porter at that point will be a little older. Thurman, people don't really know where he's heading. Pacquiao will probably be retired. So again, very strategic move then, right? It sounds a lot better. So it seems, yes, it's a very packed division, but it doesn't seem like he's going to be fighting those guys anytime soon. And if he's just going to wait it out, then he might be the king of that division while everything is still taking its course. So they're not going to rush him because they definitely don't need to because he could be the king of the division when no one's really there yet. So he could be 25 running that division and still be, fighting not the best opponents yet and still crafting, still working on his craft because, again, those guys will not be there yet. So I think he has a very bright future and a very strong, sense of understanding of how his career can unfold and how good he can be, even if he's not fighting the best right away.
Okay, last topic. This one's for John, our historian. The sport lost an all-time great over I guess it was Friday. Jose Napoles died at age 79. John, this was a guy who was 81-7, 54 knockouts. His career spanned a long time, 1958 to 1975. Won the welterweight championship from Curtis Coates in 69. Beat him again in the rematch. Successfully defended against Emil Griffith and Indian Red Lopez. Lost it to Billy Backus and won the rematch. Then had 9 more successful title defenses before John Stracey retired him in 1975. Also fought Carlos Monzon in 1974 for the middleweight title, and he lost that one by a technical decision. John, this guy was called Mantequilla, butter, because he was smooth as butter in the ring, and he was one of the best in history, wasn't he?
He definitely was, Dennis. I don't know how many times you had the pleasure of watching him, but when I was younger, once a million years ago, I always watched his fights, and he was just that. He was so smooth. He was just like a nice, easy walk in the park. He never did anything out of the ordinary in the sense that. Let me explain that. He did, but he made it look so easy that you didn't realize that he was doing something out of the ordinary because he was so smooth at the way he could do it. His jab, his left hook was a thing of beauty. His right hand, he was a puncher boxer, a boxer puncher. He could do everything in there. I don't even think he's really got enough credit in a sense, Dennis, because he was dominating the division for quite a long time, and he was beating everybody. He was defending his title a lot. I mean, the guys that he beat, Hedgeman Lewis and Emil Griffith, and one time I don't think he beat my friend Armando Muniz, but the rematch he certainly did. when he fought Curtis Cokes in 1969, he had been fighting, like you said, since 1958 for 11 years, and he never got a title shot. He was a lightweight and a junior welterweight, and he moved up to fight Curtis Cokes, and he was 60 wins and 4 losses at that point, and he beat him. So, and then he beat him and stopped him earlier in the rematch. So he was just a phenomenal fighter. When he finally reached when he got his chance for the title, he took it, ran with it, defended it. That loss to Bacchus was a fluke. Sorry, Billy, but it was just a bad cut, and then he kicked his butt in the rematch, and he dominated for 4 years after that, pretty much until he ran into Monzon, and then he was the John Stracey. I remember you could tell that he was finally starting to lose it a little bit, but all those fights, all those wars, he was in a lot of wars. But back to what you said about his nickname and Smooth, yeah, he was a natural in there. He was a thing of beauty to watch. I can just see him doing his thing right now in my mind, and he was fun to watch, Dennis, and I'm sure you remember too. And boxing world should really appreciate his talent because he definitely was one of the best ever.
Rest in peace, Jose Napoles. These guys are our expert analysts. They teach us something every week. Rizwan Zahid and John J. Responti. Travis couldn't be with us today. He's got a busted eardrum from fighting Mason Menard last night. He lost a unanimous decision. Thanks, gentlemen. Another terrific job.
You bet. Take care, guys.
All right, fellas. John Responti will be back in a couple minutes, and he and I will be talking to Benjy Esteves, one of boxing's best referees. But first we'll head to over the pond, and get some news about the UK boxing scene from Paul McLaughlin. We will be right back, so don't go away.
You're listening to the Ringside Boxing Show, the hottest, sweatiest show on West Coast Radio.
Put 'em up! Put 'em up! Which one are you first? I'll fight you both together if you want. I'll fight you with one paw tied behind my back. I'll fight you standing on one foot. I'll fight you with my eyes closed.
Hi, I'm Dennis Taylor, host of the Ringside Boxing Show, where since 2008 we have been continuously sponsored by Garcia Boxing, the first family of the sweet science on California's beautiful Central Coast. Trainers Max and Sam Garcia and ring strategist Dean Familton are regarded among the most knowledgeable in the game. And Kathy Garcia, who manages all Garcia boxing fighters, is renowned for her integrity and career guidance, having taken 2 boxers to #1 world rankings. Together they comprise one of the most respected teams in the sport. Learn more by calling 831-261-3214 or send them an email at garciaboxing25@aol.com.
Hi there, it's Paul McLaughlin with your weekly roundup of everything going on in the UK boxing scene at the moment. We start off with Luke Campbell, who believes his second world title shot against Vasily Lomachenko is arriving at a more opportune moment than the first. Campbell was denied by a split decision against Jorge Linares 2 years ago in his first world title fight, but will now have some home advantage to challenge Lomachenko on the 31st of August. Campbell believes that experience, which included losing his father shortly before the fight, then uprooting his training camp to avoid a hurricane in Miami, has set him in good stead. We caught up with Anthony Crolla, who lost to Lomachenko previously, who breaks down the fight.
2 very good fighters, 2 nice guys. When they're not punching you, if he was to win, I think it'd have to be by keeping it long, using his size advantage, the reach, keeping it long, but it's a very, very tough fight. Very, very tough fight.
Well, I can't wait for that one. Next up, Anthony Joshua believes a lucky punch caused his shock defeat to Andy Ruiz Jr. and has criticised his rival for taking too long to conclusively end their fight. Joshua was floored 4 times in 7 rounds when he lost his IBF, WBA and WBO heavyweight championships to Ruiz, but has a chance at redemption in a rematch, allegedly in Saudi Arabia on December the 7th. And with that in mind, AJ's ongoing battle with Lennox Lewis has reignited in a Sky Sports documentary. AJ has said this of Lewis.
Lennox is a clown. I don't respect Lennox. Me and Lennox aren't the same. My legacy is to sit back and enjoy the younger generation coming up and not to really be involved, just appreciate what it takes to get there. Lennox isn't like that. Me and Lennox are cut from a different cloth.
And finally, Lewis Ritson will welcome Robbie Davis Jr. to his home city of Newcastle for an all-British grudge match on October the 19th. The super lightweight rivals each won fights in Liverpool, Davies Jr.'s home city, earlier this month, before challenging each other. They have their own views, though, on who would win. First up, Ritson.
Robbie Davis is full of rubbish, we're being it's a 50-50 fight between Robbie. I'm in Liverpool. I'll call him out. I want on camera. I don't care live on Sky. No offence, but he's been running his mouth on the social media. I'm all about that. If he wants it next, he can get it. It's a 50-50 fight, but I'll smash him.
And here's what Davis had to say.
So he'll build the hype for the TV, but when it was just me and him, it was me who had the front and not him. He was scared to even look at me, and that's the God's honest truth.
Do you want to fight him next if the offer's good enough?
If the offer's good enough and it makes sense to me and my team, I'll stop him. I'll stop him on my life. I start doing his sit-ups now because he can't take a body shot. His body is the skinniest thing I've ever seen. He looked like a bag of bones at that weigh-in.
Right, well, that should be a cracking fight. I'll be back next week with more UK-British boxing news. In the meantime, gloves up and protect yourselves at all times. Back to the studio.
Thank you, Paul McLaughlin. Man, I love this segment. Paul keeps us informed on that vibrant UK boxing scene. All right, our featured guest, Benjy Esteves, is coming up next. You don't go away because this is a good one.
I'm Dennis Taylor, co-author of the Amazon bestseller Intimate Warfare, the true story of the Arturo Gatti and Mickey Ward boxing trilogy. You know, writing this book was a labor of love for John J. Responti and myself. We enjoyed every minute of the process and considered it a privilege to tell the tale of one of the most electrifying boxing trilogies in the history of this sport. Intimate Warfare traces the collision course of Arturo Gatti and Mickey Ward from their earliest days through their 3 epic fights, as well as the aftermath of this great rivalry, which culminated in one of the greatest friendships in boxing. Intimate Warfare has received a 4.5-star rating from readers and was endorsed by Hall of Famers Harold Letterman and Joe Cortez and 2-time Trainer of the Year Virgil Hunter. Our foreword was written by Ray Boom Boom Mancini, another one of the greatest blood and guts fighters of our time. Get your copy today at Amazon.com.
Welcome back to the Ringside Boxing Show on the Grueling Truth Sports Network. I'm Dennis Taylor with John J. Responti, and today's featured guest is one of the most respected referees in boxing. You've seen Benjy Esteves as the third man in the ring in some of the classic fights of our generation, really, including Felix Trinidad versus Pernell Whitaker, the Arturo Gatti-Ivan Robinson rematch, Prince Naz against Kevin Kelly. What a classic fight that was. Bernard Hopkins-Antonio Tarver, Miguel Cotto-Shane Mosley, and last year's rematch between Canelo and Golovkin. He grew up in the shadow of Madison Square Garden in that part of New York City known as Hell's Kitchen, and he learned his craft at the knee of legendary referees like Tony Orlando, Tony Perez, Rudy Battle, Joe Cortez, Rafael Ramos, Frank Capuchino. He's also a member of the New Jersey Boxing Hall of Fame. Benjy, welcome to the Ringside Boxing Show. Man, do we have questions for you. How are you, sir?
Thank you, Dennis. My pleasure to be here, and thank you for having me.
What struck me immediately about your record as a pro referee is that you go way back with the Gotti brothers. Your third pro fight, way back in 1992, was in Waterloo Village in Stanhope, New Jersey, and it was Joe Gotti against Mike Williams. Joe was the older brother of Arturo. And your 8th pro fight was Arturo against Clifford Hicks at what must have been a really glamorous venue, Memorial High School Gym in Bricktown, New Jersey. And that was Arturo's 11th pro fight. 3 months after that, you had Arturo and Luis Guzman in Atlantic City. Benjy, what are your memories of the Gotti brothers?
Oh, they were exciting, especially Joe. We always thought that Joe was going to be the star of the family, but it turns out that it was Arturo. He was special. You can tell, very hard hitter, a lot of determination, and he was just a gritty fighter.
You're talking about Joe there, or you're talking about Arturo?
Well,
both.
Arturo. I thought that Joe was going to be the star, but it turned out to be Arturo. I guess he was just waiting in the wings for his opportunity, and when it came, he took it and flew with it.
And he sure did. You had Gotti and Gabriel Ruelas, and also the Gotti rematch with Ivan Robinson. How much pressure as a referee do you feel in a fight like that, trying to be fair but also protective to two guys who are absolutely determined to go out on their shield if necessary. Nobody gave us more thrills in the ring than Arturo, and he also didn't have a whole lot of regard for his own personal safety in the ring. He left that part up to the referee in his corner. Well, does that kind of responsibility kind of boost the butterflies in your own stomach as a ref?
Absolutely. Even to this day, whenever I'm in the ring, I get nervous. It's just part of my makeup. But to answer your question, they were pretty well matched when you're speaking about Ruelas and Gatti. They were pretty even matched, and they were meeting themselves probably at the prime of their careers or close to it. So it was, I just let them handle it. And I just did whatever I had to do to stay out of the way. Of course, you have a regard for safety. But I'll give you a perfect example. I did 5 of Gatti's matches, and I would not have reffed him late in his career the way I reffed him during this stage of his career.
Really?
With the Relas, because he was a different fighter back then. Once he got a little bit old, he had a lot of mileage, and I would have reffed him a little different late in his career.
Well, what's always interesting to John and I is the fine line that boxing officials, refs and judges both, have to walk with fighters where friendship is concerned. And, you guys must get to know some of these guys fairly well. And I'm sure in certain cases you grow to like them a lot. But you also have to maintain that professional distance because when the bell rings, you can't be their friend or their enemy. You're the impartial arbiter. The integrity of the sport depends on that. What kind of challenges is it at times to keep the professional part separate from personal?
Well, first of all, we don't have the luxury of being a fan, per se. And one of the things that I do, and you can ask any coach that knows me, whether they're from the East Coast, West Coast, whatever it is, once I get to a show and I see them and I know them, because a lot of them I know, especially the New Jersey and East Coast coaches and seconds. And when I get to the show, first thing I ask them is, you got somebody on tonight? And they says yes. And I say, well, good luck. We can talk later. And they respect that. Due to the fact that there may be his opponent's corner watching me, and they're seeing me having a lengthy conversation with one of the coaches, and it puts you in a bad spot. And just perception is sometimes, the killer.
Interesting. Hey, Benjy, your parents came over from Puerto Rico, we read, and you were born in Milwaukee, but your family relocated to that tough Hell's Kitchen in New York City, which is where you grew up. Tell us about that neighborhood, that Hell's Kitchen when you were a kid. What was it like?
Well, I grew up around the Westies. I'm sure you know who they are. And if you ever seen a movie called Sleepers, there's a scene where the gentleman at the bodega, and he says, you hear, you look, you see nothing, you hear nothing, and you keep your mouth shut. And that's how I was raised. And that's how we were able to get along with all the different ethnicities in New York City. People think the Hell's Kitchen thought that it was a bad spot for individuals, but it was a mixture of different races, and that's why they called it Hell's Kitchen.
Interesting. So tell us about your parents. What were they like?
Well, they came over in the 50s. They were migrant workers, and they didn't like Milwaukee. It was too cold. They didn't last very long there, and they moved back to Puerto Rico, and a year later we moved into Hell's Kitchen, where I grew up at. My father left us when I was 2, and my mother, she was my mother and my father. She raised me to be the person that I am today.
You were interesting, right? I mean, you really got through. You were kind of academic in school, right?
I just have a high school education. Then I went to a trade school because I went to a banking institute because I was working for Chase Manhattan Bank. But as far as education, I just wasn't a bookworm, unfortunately. But I made sure that my brother, Noberto, he went to college and he did much better than I did.
Okay. So this is a great story. There's a pretty solid lightweight back then named Victor Melendez who wound up with a record of 17-2 with 4 draws. One of his losses was to Ismael Laguna, who became a world champion, as we know. Tell our audience who Victor Melendez was in your life and the impact he had on you as a kid.
Victor Melendez was a professional fighter. He was a national champion for the U.S. because back in the day, if you were a national champion in Puerto Rico, you were part of the North American region, so you were considered a national champion as well for the U.S. He was a 2-time national champion, and a lot of the way that I am is because of him. He's very humble, doesn't say much, doesn't talk much about what he did, but I'm very proud of the fact that he was a very good fighter, and he went on about business very quietly.
He was a cousin, right?
He was my uncle. He
Your
was my
uncle?
uncle. He's still alive.
Oh, I see.
How far did you live from Madison Square Garden?
I was on 44th Street and 10th Avenue. I was 8.5 blocks from Madison Square Garden.
So were you the kind of kid who would wander over there on fight night and try to find a way inside?
Absolutely. I used to go from what was called the Felt Forum and sneak into the garden whenever I had different events. My first professional fight that I saw live was when Antifermo fought Harold Western in the main event.
Oh, wow. Really?
So that was, yeah. Some of the listeners might not know who that is, but you can look at them.
Oh, yeah. Well, a lot of our listeners are going to know who those two guys are. You know, there have been a few versions of that place over the decades. What do you remember about the Madison Square Garden that you knew as a kid and as a young man? What was the atmosphere like there?
Well, Madison Square Garden, to me, was like my second home. I used to watch all the events there, and I remember I used to sit in a certain section up in the blue seats and the cheap seats. And I don't want to get ahead of myself because I don't know what questions you guys are going to ask me, but when I did my first fight at Madison Square Garden, I went to sit there where I used to sit as a kid, and I looked at the ring, and I just got it out of my system that, hey, I used to sit here and watch fights from up here, and I'm going to be working there tonight. And any new official that has ever worked at the Garden, their first time, I take them around and I make them look at the ring from a distance so that they can get the feeling and get it out of their system as well. But Madison Square Garden was a magical place for me.
Did it have a certain smell to it?
Say that again?
Did it have a certain smell?
Well, not really. It smelled like home for me because it was, it's just,
and Benjy, I was just going to ask, Benjy, there's something about those arenas, those classic arenas, because I went to the Olympic a lot of times when I was younger, and could you feel it? I mean, when you went there, there's so much history. It's almost like there's ghosts floating around in a place like that. Did you feel that when you went, and then later when you were refereeing, that this place was just like a museum, just very special?
Well, when you walk in there, I mean, it's like, first of all, the building is awesome. When I was a kid, my mother used to take me to the old Madison Square Garden on 50th Street and in Manhattan. And just being there, yes, you feel it's like an aura. And also, when you're in the ring, it's just it's like the ring is shaking, especially if you have a local. Like when I did the Cotto Mosley fight, the place was like going nuts. Prince Naseem against Kelly, that, as you mentioned before, that was special. Everything was like, I'm not at a loss for words, unfortunately.
Now, did you fight as an amateur?
I used to train. My brother fought in the Golden Gloves and Spanish Gloves, and I have two cousins that used to box. But when I wanted to get into it, I was a little too old, so I started refereeing under the tutelage of Frankie Martinez.
Yeah. So what attracted you to refereeing? Why did you decide, hey, I want to do this?
Well, I just like the fact that you can, first of all, I did 10 years in the amateurs, so I never had any intention of going professional. So I liked working with the kids, and it was just something that I loved to do. And being that I used to work out, it just came as a natural to me.
Interesting. Yeah, we mentioned a pretty lengthy list of famous refs who helped teach you your craft. Of all of them, who had the most impact on your career as a mentor?
Well, I joined the amateurs in '82, in 1983, I happened to be at a show, PAL Finals, which for me was something special. And lo and behold, who's sitting at ringside? Joe Cortez. And I was like, oh my God, I can't believe this. So I just tried to take him out of my mind, and I did what I had to do. And as I was leaving the ring, he called me over, and we have a bond that has lasted for since 83 rather. And to this day, I still have the program that first time I met him, and we're very close. He's had a big impact on me. Larry Hazard, Senior, and Smoker. I've worked a lot with Steve Smoker. You mentioned some of the referees that I came up with. I just wanted to add a few, if I could. I came under the team of Arthur McCanty Sr., Tony Perez. You mentioned Rudy Battle, Joe O'Neill. You mentioned Frank Capuchino, Rafael Ramos, Randy Newman. These are the guys that I came when I was in 1992 when I turned pro. So I was learning different styles. I was learning every show. But I'd have to say Joe Cortez to answer your question. I'm sorry it took so long.
It's all right. It's all right. You know, when Dennis and I had Jack Reese on, I know you know him, the referee, mostly does Southern California, but right? Yeah, you know him. He talked about how he prepared for fights, before what time he got there, and he had a routine. Do you do the same thing? Do you get there at a certain time? Do you go through the same routine before you're getting ready to referee a fight?
Okay, now when you say a fight, are you saying a world title match or just a regular show?
Yeah, just say a big fight in your career that you're getting ready to referee, very big title fight or whatever. Do you have a routine that you stick with?
Okay, first of all, I do my research on the fighters. If most of them I already know, but if I am doing a fighter that I'm familiar with, I'll go into BoxRec and then I'll go into YouTube to check out his tendencies or her tendencies. We have women boxing now too, so I'll just check out wherever I can, get as much information as I can. Do they cut? Is there a lot of point deductions? Because you kind of want to know what you're getting yourself into. And I get to the shows early. I'm always the first one there and usually the last one to leave because I want to just be, I don't want to get stuck in traffic. I don't need any additional stress. So I get there early. Usually I might have the main event and I'm already in uniform when most of the guys get there. And I have this ritual that I learned from Rudy Battle where he does everything the same way. He'll put on his left shoe first and then he'll do the right shoe. And he taught me, don't let anyone mess up with your psyche when you're in the locker room. Because we were working together once, and this coach came in and, hey, where do we get the spit buckets? He said, we're officials. He said, we don't have time for that. And I thought he was a little strong, but then he explained to me what he was trying to do. He says, look, you're trying to get your head together on what you're about to do. Don't let anyone take you off your game plan. So, yes, I have this little ritual that I do, yes.
This is the Ringside Boxing Show from Monterey, California. I'm Dennis Taylor with John J. Responte. We're talking to Benjy Esteves, referee from New York, New Jersey area, and he's been around for a long time, done some huge fights. Which fight as a professional referee do you remember as your coming out party? When was the first time you remember feeling bigger butterflies than usual?
I would have to say, there's so many of them, but wow, that's a good question. I would have to say when I did Mayweather and Chop Chop Corley, due to the fact that when I got to the arena, I wasn't aware that was going to be my fight, so I had to make a mental adjustment. Because what I do is when I find out that I'm on a card, if I don't know which fight I'm doing, I study everybody on the card. So I just made a mental adjustment. But I think that fight gave me a little, even though it might not be to others, but to me it was a very insignificant fight for me. I believe it was a unification, or maybe elimination. I think it was eliminated. So that was very special for me.
That was a memorable fight because there weren't there 6 knockdowns in that fight? Chop Chop went down 6 times?
I think Chop Chop did not go down in that fight.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm mixing that up with something else.
So you may be confusing it with Kelly and Naseem. There was 3 knockdowns each.
Yeah. That's right.
Sorry to correct you.
Yeah, I saw you talk about Kelly and Naseem, and that might be the most memorable of your career. Why is that?
That was the first one for Prince Naseem in the United States, and I think it was, to me, that was a pretty significant assignment. And I'll tell you a funny story about that. I went into the arena thinking that I had Junior Jones against Kennedy McKinney. I was not. So when I got there, everyone's grinning and how you feeling? And I said, I'm feeling good. Like, why is everybody asking me that? And Wayne Kelly, God rest his soul, comes up to me. You got the main event. Do you know that? And I said, oh, I didn't know that. So just the fact the way it came out and how everything worked out, to me, that was a big fight.
And you went into Naz's dressing room to give him kind of final instructions there, and he asked you a little bit of a smart aleck question at the end of that, didn't he?
Yeah. He kind of interrupted me, and I told him, Naseem, let me finish. I came to see you. Let me finish my instructions. Once I'm done, you can ask me whatever you want. And the reason I do that is if you lose control of the locker room, you're not going to control the ring. So as soon as I finished, he says, you know how to count to 10? I said, yes, I do. He says, that's all you're going to have to do tonight. I said, all right, I'll take that under advice, and we laughed it off.
Okay, so Benjy, when you work a fight between two of the best fighters in the world, say Pernell Whitaker and Felix Trinidad, which is one of yours, is it pretty awe-inspiring to have the closest you in the arena of that kind of skill level?
Yes. It's an awesome feeling. You try not to get caught up. You try to see exactly what the fans are seeing, and what I mean by that is if a puncher gets a shot and you hear the crowd awing and oohing, you want to make sure that you're not caught up in the whole scene, but you want to pay attention to what's going on. But yes, it is intense when you're in there, and as long as you can. What I try to do is when I'm in the ring, I'm thinking, okay, I just passed the neutral corner, I'm blocking a judge, the doctor's over here on the left of me. So you'll notice when there's a knockdown, I don't panic, I don't jump, because I know I just passed the neutral corner. There's a knockdown, he's got to go or she has to go to the furthest, which is away from me. And these are the things that I think of so you don't get caught up with the fight. You're constantly thinking and you're doing your job as you're moving around.
How challenging is it to stay completely focused, especially for a young ref, for 10 rounds, for 12 rounds?
I'll give you an example because it happens to all of us. Sometimes you're moving in the ring and you're thinking to yourself, am I in position? Am I moving right? Guess what? You just lost focus. So I try to stay away from those thoughts. And consistency is the formula for achieving perfection. And if you're consistent, that's how you can become a better referee. So you practice and just keep your mind into what you have to do and don't get caught up with what you're doing.
You know, when Pernell Whitaker died a few weeks ago, Benjy, boxing fans debated what might have happened if he and Money Mayweather had been part of the same generation of boxers. You refereed both guys. Who do you think would have won if they had ever fought each other?
Oh my God, that's a tough one.
Sure is, isn't it?
In my opinion, that's a toss-up. You know, you got a great defensive fighter. Both of them actually great defensive fighters. Lefty, southpaw. So that would be a pick 'em, in my opinion.
Okay. Yeah, that is. You know, we love to ask this question when we have referees on the show because you guys know this, and you guys are right there. You're the third man in the ring, and it's when you talk about the best spot to be. What kind of things do you see and hear when you're 3 or 4 feet away that the rest of us don't when we're sitting in the seats or watching on television? I'm
going to give you 2 examples. When I had Robinson against Arturo Gatti II, God rest his soul.
Mm-hmm.
They were exchanging pleasantries. I love you, man. And the round was over. I'll see you in a few. I mean, I couldn't believe the stuff that they were saying. And they were punching each other out, but they were very respectful of each other. And when Cotto fought Mosley, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
When Cotto fought Mosley, they exchanged low blows. I mean, I believe Cotto had hit Mosley first, and or vice versa. And I was going to go into one of them, but they both tapped each other's gloves. In other words, okay, we got it. We worked it out. And I let them continue. Because the fight before, Cotto had fought Judah. And I said, oh, boy, I didn't want this to, a few fights before. And I know that was a little chippy. So when I went into Cotto's locker room, I informed him that I'm not going to hold anything against him, but I need him to be aware that I'm trying to keep the fight on a professional level. And when I went to see Mosley, I told, because his father jumped up, Jack, nice gentleman. And I said, Jack, I already covered it with Cotto, so just be aware. I already covered the low blows and stuff, so just, it's taken care of. Let me handle it. So during the fight, Cotto and Mosley, they just exchanged low blows, and I was going to go into one of them, but they tapped each other's gloves, and that told me, okay, we got it. We're cool.
Nice. Yeah, when you're in the center of the ring giving final instructions to a couple of guys like Bernard Hopkins and Antonio Tarver, and the arena is packed, and there's a buzz in the air, and you're on a worldwide TV, how much intensity do you feel?
Again, I try not to get caught up in the moment, and I try to make it about the fighters. First of all, in a fight of that magnitude, I've already spoken to them in the locker room. And Hopkins, with all due respect, he's one of those guys that can really be a headache because he knows everything. In my opinion, he's a consummate professional. And I had already talked to him in the locker room, so we understood each other. And so it's not much pressure at all, to tell you the truth. I just go over, listen, you know what I expect from you? Keep it clean, obey my commands. I don't have a catchphrase. I leave that for other people. I don't make it about myself. I leave it to them. Let them be the show. But I don't stress myself out on that. They already know. I usually hold their gloves so that they don't get too close to each other. And if they don't want to touch gloves, as soon as I finish the instructions, I'll just push the gloves together and leave it at that.
How much of a challenge is it to referee a guy like Bernard Hopkins who knows how not to get caught?
Well, you're right. He's, like I said, he's a consummate professional, but Bernard's the type of fighter that he'll take whatever you give him. So if you're green, he's going to do everything that he can to win the fight, which is what he's supposed to do. And what I try to do with him, the first time that I refed him, I believe it was against Tarver first, and then I did Pavlik, but he's one of those fighters that when you try to break him, he's like trying to move a wall. So I would use him as my anchor and push the other fighter away so that I can create the space. So, but the second time I did him, I was able to tuck my arm under his elbow across his chest, and I was able to work him due to the fact that I already knew how. But he's one of those fighters that he just knows everything. Very knowledgeable, very respectful individual, and probably the most complete fighter that we have right now.
I saw you answer a very interesting question that I think people would be fascinating to know the difference. What's the difference between a clinch and a hold?
When you tell a fighter, when they get locked up and you tell them to break and they make an effort and you go in and they concede, that's a clinch. But when you go in and you tell a fighter to break and you're trying to break them and they're not letting go, that is a hold. That's where a fighter is gaining, in my opinion, an unfair advantage or trying to take advantage of his opponent. And I was taught that by Rudy Battle. As I said, I learned a lot from a lot of different fighters, and he told me this is what's a clinch, this is what's a hold. And I've had to explain that to some coaches when I've given instructions because some of them are concerned with fights like that.
Benji, do you have... Oh, I'm sorry, Dennis.
When do you stop a fight?
Mm-hmm. When you feel a fighter doesn't have his equilibrium in terms of he's up against the ropes and he doesn't have his elbows up and he's not weaving and trying to roll with the punches. Some fights, I'm not good at determining who's winning the fight unless it's one-sided, and that's when you make that determination. But there's fights where I have gone to watch the video and I say, gee, this guy was winning the fight, and I had to, unfortunately, I had to stop it. So things can change very easily. But if a fighter's not protecting himself or it looks like he's losing his equilibrium, I would usually jump in and stop the fight. I spoke to a doctor. I want to add, if I just may just add, I spoke to a doctor once, and a sports medicine doctor and a boxing doctor, Dr. Richard Estrico from Staten Island. And he told me after 21 minutes of strenuous, tough fight, fighters will start to show fatigue. So he told me, pay attention. And that's one of the things that I try to teach new officials so that they can be aware of that.
Hey, I was just going to ask, people debate this all the time, like with penalties. You know, a referee will warn a guy, don't hold, like you were mentioning, and then he'll warn him again and then take a point away. Do you have a number of times that you will say, stop holding, or I'm going to take a point away, or like you do warn him once or twice, or how does that work?
Two things. One, you try to build a case. In other words, you warn him. If you have to go to the corner, you go and tell him, listen, you're holding, watch the holding. And before he comes out, as you're waiting for the bell to ring for the next round, I'll remind him, watch the holding. Remember what we talked about. And I want to give you an example because if it's flagrant, you don't have to give a warning. I'll give you an example. If a fighter's coming in and he's coming in like a low and the other fighter sidesteps him and throws him out the ring, you're not going to wait for him to do that 3 times. Okay? You're not going to wait for him to do that. That's flagrant, and you can nail him right away. I don't have a formula except that you'll feel it in your guts when it's time to take a point. And I try not to shoot my bullets too soon, because sometimes when you start taking points in the beginning of the fight, unless, of course, again, it's flagrant, you kind of put yourself behind the 8 ball, and now you have to do what you don't want to do. So you kind of build a case. Go to the corner, warn them. For example, if a fighter gets hit low and the other fighter doesn't react, okay, he continues to fight, I'll still say, keep him up. But if the fighter reacts, I say, stop. And I will signal and let the other fighter know you got to keep your shots up, so that the fighter that got offended, at least he's aware that I'm protecting him and that I saw it. But if he continues to fight, I'll still say, keep him up, so that, because some fighters are too tough for their own good, but you still have to protect them. So I don't know if I answered your question, but I don't have a formula. You feel it in your guts when it's time to take a point.
If you had been refereeing when Tyson bit off Holyfield's ear, do you think you might have made a different decision?
Oh, it's easy for us to second guess that, but you know, I may have disqualified him immediately because that's unheard of. But I may have disqualified him, or at least taken a point and then penalized him. That's flagrant, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But again,
as a boxing fan, I look back on that, Benjy, and I think, you know, I can't believe that they let the fight go on. But I've brought that same question up to about 3 different referees, and I think 2 of them said that they would have made the same decision Mills did. But yeah, it's hard in 2020 hindsight to say what you would have done, I guess.
Yeah. No, the magnitude of the fight, it was a lot going on. You know, I still respect him. He was one of the best. God bless him. I know he's not well, but he was one of my favorites.
Benjy, boxing people and boxing fans can take it pretty personal at times when their guy loses. Have you found yourself in a few volatile situations over the years?
I don't have many problems with people. Even sometimes I get people calling me, telling me that I got dissed on social media. I don't get caught up with that. I've never had anyone approach me about a fight. I stopped the fight once where don't want to name the coach, and I was doing another fight a couple of years later, and he thought that I should have given his guy a little bit more time, and I said, we're not the ones that are taking the punches, and when I put my head down at night to rest, I want to do it with a clear conscience. And I said, and I felt your fighter was not ready to continue, and I went and did his fight with his fighter. We had no problems. So yeah, there's some concerns, but I've never been treated nasty or threatened.
You have reffed in England and Ireland and Italy and Poland and Germany and Panama and South Africa. I may be leaving out some spots. How do the fans differ in some of those places?
All right. For example, Argentina, they're very, very into their boxing. So is Australia. Japan, they're a little quiet. China's the same way. Canada, they're nuts, and I mean that in a good way. They're fanatical. Germany's very good. Poland is the same way. And Panama, forget it. They're very, very heavy into their boxing. So overall, most of the countries are up there in terms of tenacity and love for the sport.
Do you have a favorite, Benjy? I mean, if you get assigned like a place like England or Ireland, do you say, yeah, good, I really like it? Is there one that really stands out that you really enjoy going to, a European country?
I like Japan. So they treat you really, really nice. Not that the other countries didn't, but I've only been there once, and I was very impressed. Argentina, and Germany, very, very places to work.
Okay, how about this? I like this question. How much nerve does it take to jump in and break up a violent exchange at the end of a round? You know, two big guys are going at it. You got to get in there when the bell rings and the fighters are basically ignoring the bell. What do you do?
Okay, one of the things that I've borrowed from my West Coast colleagues is to say 10 seconds when I hear the indicator. And one of the tricks that Larry Hazard taught us was if you can't part them, to squeeze them together. Because fighters don't like to be mushed. They don't like to be mushed. They're sweaty. And the last thing they want to do is squeeze together. So once you squeeze them, they stop punching. And then you can slice them, which means to come in and break them apart.
Yeah, cool. Have you ever been hit? I mean, when you were trying to do that? Break them up? Yeah. Been hurt? Stunned?
No, never hurt. But I got hit once on my neck. And another time I broke up a fight, and the fighter bounced off the ropes and hit me in the chest with his head, and I felt that for a couple of days. But nothing. Thank God I've never been hurt. No.
Wow. All right. Hey, last one for you. Which era of boxing is your favorite on a personal level? When do you think the sport had the deepest pool of talent?
I would have to say during the welterweight era with Leonard, Hagler, Hearns. During that scope of Benitez, Palomino, Cuevas, and of course, the heavyweights back in the 70s.
Mm-hmm. The Ali era.
Yes.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah. Did you ever see Ali fight in person?
No. Closed circuit. Closed circuit. I've been around him. I met him at the Golden Glove Finals. I don't remember the year, back when I was in the amateurs. And I was doing a show in Atlantic City once, and he was sitting at ringside. So, yes, I did get a chance to be around him, but never to see him fight live.
Okay, I'm going to throw one more at you, because we've asked this to a few guys. I'm always interested in the answer. Which heavyweight, past or present, on his best night, beats Muhammad Ali / Cassius Clay on his best night?
Oof. That's a good one. I want to go back a little bit. Even though he was much smaller than he was, I think Joe Louis had a good chance. I think Joe Louis had a good chance.
Somebody else.
A lot of people agree. Yeah, a lot of people agree with that.
I just feel that he was smaller. Joe was smaller, but he had those round shoulders. He had those puncher shoulders, and I just feel that he had a chance if he can catch out in a 15-round fight, of course.
Yeah.
Benjy Esteves has been in the ring as a world-class referee. He's still one of the best in the sport after 27 years as a pro. Benjy, man, what a great pleasure it's been to talk to you. Thanks so much for making some time for us today on the Ringside Boxing Show.
You bet.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it, and continued success, guys.
Take care.
The great Benjy Esteves on the Ringside Boxing Show. Hey, do you like this podcast? Do us a solid and post the Ringside Boxing Show on your social media platforms. Help us grow. Also, be sure to check out the best website in the world for daily boxing news. We update ringsideboxingshow.com with the biggest headlines and most interesting stories every day of the year. If you are a hardcore boxing fan, this should be your first stop every morning. Might be the only boxing site you need to visit all day long. Check it out right now and you will be amazed, guaranteed. ringsideboxingshow.com. We want to thank our expert analysts, Travis Hartman, Rizwan Zahid, and John J. Responti for their weekly contributions to this show, as well as Paul McLaughlin, our outstanding British correspondent. And, of course, another huge thanks to today's featured guest, referee Benjy Esteves, one of the best in the sport. And we thank you, Ringside Nation, for being a part of our worldwide audience again today. Keep your chin tucked, and we'll talk to you again next week on the Ringside Boxing Show.
Well, it's a great day for me to whoop somebody's ass. It's a bad day, so you better get off of my back. You might get cold cocked if you cross my path. It's a great day for me to whoop somebody's